Hi everyone, it's Cheryl the Craft Nut 32, and I'm here today to start off my Christmas card series for 2014. I'm going to be using this Hero Arts cling stamp called Be Jolly, and then I had an idea with that stamp to pull out my Winter Woodland Cricket cartridge. I'm going to be using the holly from that cartridge, but I'm actually going to be cutting out only the shift feature for it. So I'm going to start off with an 8.5 by 11 piece of craft cardstock. I cut it at 4 1/4 and then I scored it at 5 1/2. I'm going to get my bone folder just to give it a nice crisp edge. I'm going to pull out some Color Box ink. This is Frost White, and I'm going to ink up that nice big cling stamp background. And I thought it'd look really pretty on the craft cardstock. So I'm just going over it a couple of times to make sure it's really nicely coated with that white ink. And I'm going to grab my card. It's folded and it's folded. I'm going to actually turn it around so that the crease is closest to me. I didn't want anything to kind of open up as I was laying it down and get inked up ahead of time. So I'm just rubbing it a couple of times just to ensure that all that ink transfers onto that piece of cardstock. I'm going to then pull out some clear embossing powder from Stamp Stuff. And I'm going to make sure it has a really good coating over that nice background. So next I'm going to grab my heat tool. I'm going to turn it on and let it warm up. And I'm going to find a way of picking up that card without knocking off any of the embossing powder. And now I'm just going to heat it up and melt that embossing powder. And it will give it a really nice kind of shiny background, kind of just a little extra something for the card. And I did get a little bit of that embossing powder on my workspace, so I'm just wiping it off. And I'm going to move that out of the way. I'm going to pull out my Cuttlebug. I have some craft cardstock and my circle nestabilities, and I'm going to create a wreath here. So I'm going to use that larger piece first. I'm going to run it through. And then I'm going to grab that smaller nestability, just center it as best I can in the middle, and then run it through the Cuttlebug one more time. So I'm going to move my Cuttlebug out of the way. I'm going to move the extra pieces out of the way, and I'm going to pull in that holly there. And that holly was cut at 1.75 inches. I'm grabbing my little finger dauber and some green Distress ink. That Distress ink is peeled paint. I'm just going to take a moment and I'm going to ink up all of the edges of those little holly pieces. And I just thought it would look really nice, just to kind of give the holly some dimension on the wreath. So I went back and I decided just to ink up the edges. I started off just doing the top, and I thought it would look really nice having the edges of the holly also inked up. So now I'm going to use some Scotch Quick Dry Glue, and I'm showing you here I just took a moment and I scored the center of each holly. That way I thought it would just help kind of curl it up and give it some dimension on the wreath. So now I'm just taking a moment to position it exactly where I'd like to have it, and I'm going to start filling up that wreath. taking out some of these little rhinestones, and I'm pulling out my Spectrum Noir marker, DR7, and I'm just going to color them in. I've done one just ahead of time and it wasn't quite the right color, so I decided to go with a darker marker. And I'm using those little rhinestones as the holly on my wreath. So now I pulled out a paper piercer, but this turned out to be disastrous. I couldn't actually use it to pick up my rhinestones, and so I just kind of put it aside and left it alone. I thought that they might still be wet with the ink from the marker, but they were fine. So I just started picking them up and just placing them right where I wanted. I tried to tuck them in underneath the holly to kind of give it more of a realistic look. And here it is getting stuck to my finger. So now that I've gotten all of them in place, I'm going to kind of tidy up a little bit and just position it where I'd like it on my card. I'm going to grab that Scotch Quick Dry again, and I'm going to use that to adhere the wreath down to the front of the card. And I like using that glue because it's really nice. It doesn't stick straight away. You can kind of position it if it's not exactly where you want it to be, but it does dry really fast. So here I have some red ribbon, and I'm just tying it into a nice little bow, getting it just nice in the way that I'd like it. And I'm going to trim off those little tail pieces. And here I'm going to grab a glue dot. And with my glue dots, I always buy the largest that I can, but I always cut them down. It just seems easier to store one size and cut them to the size that I need, rather than having a whole bunch on hand. And I'm going to use that glue dot to adhere the bow to the front of the wreath. So now I'm going to move on to my sentiment, and I'm grabbing my double-ended banner die from Paper Tray Ink. I have some white cardstock I'm going to use to cut out with that die. And it's giving me some trouble, so I'm struggling with it a little bit. And I'm just going to move that Cut-A-Bug out of the way. So I've decided to use the shorter banner, and I'm going to grab the O Tannenbaum stamp set from Paper Tray Ink, and I'm going to use the Season's Greetings sentiment from that stamp set once I find it. So I'm just trying to line it up on my craft mat, and there's my head getting in the way. And then I grabbed my Fiskars stamp press, but it's not quite lining up. It's really just sticking to my fingers. It's giving me some trouble. So now I'm going to lay it on the grid on the stamp press itself, rather than trying to pick it up off the mat. And for the sentiment, I'm going to be using some Memento Tuxedo Black ink. And sorry about my head again. So now I'm going to use my ATG, and I'm going to use it to adhere the banner to the front of the card. And I don't know if you've noticed, but I stamped on one side and I didn't like how it turned out, so I flipped it over and stamped again. So it's really nice. You can just kind of hide that with the ATG and with that quality of paper and the ink. So I just flipped it over and it was nicely hidden. So now I've moved to the inside of the card where I had 2 leftover holly pieces. And that is the little red berries that was cut with the cartridge. So I'm just gluing those down on the inside of the card. And for a nice final touch, I've grabbed my clear Wink of Stella pen. And that is my card for today. I hope you liked it, and thank you for watching. Bye!